Okay, the next order of agenda, finally, here we have for Sergeant McLaughlin from the Town Sheriff's Office.
Good evening. First of all, I want to thank you guys for having me here. We're not always the popular crew. You know, I typically don't pull people over just to see how their day's going. I did have a Board of Pharmacy guy with me earlier to help me, because I do not know all the answers. I don't think any of us do. I do know one thing, I'm more popular than him. Because I know you guys don't appreciate him coming in there. Everybody was very nice to him, but I could see when he walked away, they were like, thank God. I think Senator Schiavone is not only the youngest legislator, he was definitely the youngest in the room, too. I'm finally older than some politicians. I don't know if that's good or bad. I'm going to open it up for you guys to ask me some questions. I know some of you guys have some concerns. I have some concerns. It's supposed to be my job to worry whether I'm coming home to my family at night, not yours. You're here to help people. That's unfair. You've been put in an unfair position as pharmacists. You guys took an oath to help people. You've helped me. I get my prescriptions filled, which I'd like a little bit ahead in line when I am in there. But it's not fair. But at the end of the day, what you need to do is make sure that you're coming home to your family. So to sit here and tell you that the time lock safe is a good or a bad thing, could be a good or a bad thing, I'm not sure. I don't have an answer as far as what's going to keep you safe. I do know this. These people are desperate. They're definitely addiction controlled, and they will do what they have to do. So as a pharmacist, if you're in a retail environment, my suggestion to you, for example, they were talking about robberies. Without going into specific details, subject walked around the store for 30 minutes, not doing anything, not buying. And obviously, from what I heard tonight, you guys have a problem to where you can't even barely look up from what you're doing. So somebody in that store definitely needs to start looking at, hey, there's something suspicious with this guy. Call us. The other thing I'd like to do is, me and your buddy at the pharmacy board, we're talking about, there needs to be some type of email. And I know it's been done throughout the state. For example, I'm in Mahoning County, but you guys are a member of 6 counties, and we can spread it as far as we need to where if, for example, in the city of Struthers at a pharmacy gets a bad script, or they have somebody that's suspicious, I want that information to be able to go out to everyone. I want you guys to know what to look for, what we got, and and call. I'm a member of the Mahoning Valley Law Enforcement Task Force, which is our county's drug task force. If you guys have a pen and paper, if you want to talk to me afterwards, I'll give you a card. Let me give you our tip line. I'd like to give you my cell phone, but I don't know that my wife would appreciate that. It's 330-788-9960. And those all come to me. Obviously, if you get a bad script, if you have somebody suspicious coming, I can't come to every pharmacy. And there's 15 of us. We can't come to every pharmacy. We're not here to take the place of your local law enforcement, but we are here to help you. Eventually, I'm going to start reaching out and contacting different pharmacies, and what I'd like to see is the group email. I don't want your specific email. I want an email that covers all of your employees. Because if I'm dependent on emailing her every time, if she's not at work or doesn't have it on her email to forward, that information is useless to you. And you also can we have to use each other. We have the meth check now, we have ORs. These are all things that we use in conjunction with each other, and these are all investigative tools that I can use. I can't do my job without you anymore. And it's a shame, but the main thing, focus on going home. These people are desperate, and they don't care what they have to do. And it's a shame that we live in a society like this, but it's not coming, it's here. So, with that, does anybody have any questions for me? If you're at the mic longer than I think, I am going to tase you. And if you yell at me, I will tase you.
What about an app? You know, I mean, we get apps, we get notifications that games are canceled because of weather. What about some type of an app that pharmacists could sign up and you're gonna get?
Let me take this shirt off, because that sounds like a moneymaker. I'll come back as just Larry. No, that's a good idea, and I'm open for any suggestions. I think that's something we can come up with together, and you guys, in conjunction with each other, to work with us is going to be phenomenal. So we're open for ideas.
I guess the other thing is can somebody spend some time telling us these are the best things to do in those situations? I mean, being in Poland, we've had our Walgreens got hit, and then Starbucks got hit, and then Borman got hit. Now I've heard it's the same person, and he's going to show you a gun, and he's going to send a note, and then he's going to do this. And it'd be nice if somebody. I know you can't tell us, but
I want to have the answer for you, and I want to have a direct answer for you that this is exactly what you should do. No, I'm not going to not say nothing, but here's what I will tell you. There's no drug or anything worth your life.
No, I know that. I'm going to give somebody everything or whatever they want. I guess what I'm saying is give us some direction. I mean, at least.
I think every pharmacy also has a unique situation. Some pharmacies are in the back of a store, as far as retail is concerned. Some are in the front. It depends on access too. But again, a lot of these people are building up their courage. Without going into detail again, the 30 minutes the guy was in
But I
there.
mean, are we not allowed to know that information? I guess at least we would know what to expect.
Well, that's what I'm telling you now. I would start watching out for anything out of the ordinary. You know, a guy walking around your store for 30 minutes, pretty much just pacing, not looking at anything. I'm waiting for a ride, and when somebody challenged him. He was building his courage up.
I guess what I'm saying is this situation that keeps occurring supposedly is the same person. And I'm saying, but none of us are aware of that. I mean, some of us might have that information.
You mean as far as physical descriptions, what we know, that type of stuff? Absolutely. That's why I want this email to go out. I want you to know what I know, and me to know what you know. That's why I would love to get this set up.
Is it any riskier to have a gun?
You mean a pharmacist?
Back in the pharmacy? we hear complaints amongst.
Remember we were just talking about people doing what other people do? You can't do that with the police. You will not replace me. That's going to be a company choice and an individual choice. I don't know what. I know you're an owner, but I know a lot of people are in retail. I'm sure their corporate offices are going to say absolutely not. That's something you got to be trained in. That's another responsibility that you have to have too. You know, you have a lot of responsibility. You guys are, you know, from listening to what you guys go through every day, it is crazy. And how many prescriptions you fill, and what all you're responsible for, being one person with all these different scripts. That's a lot to add to your plate too. Yes.
There was an incident with us and our pharmacy, and they called in a fake prescription, and we knew it was fake. We contacted the doctor, and they asked us to call the law enforcement. But I guess what I had a problem with was that they had told me that the person had to actually pick up the prescription, and you had to stall them, and it was very uncomfortable. Is there anything that they can do to avoid them even coming back into the pharmacy, or, you know, preventing them even from coming there? Because I feel like you're putting people in a situation where, you know, you're just waiting for them to come in and to stall them. I mean, you don't know what they can do, snap at any minute.
But you have to understand, once they possess it, then I got them. That's why we like to do that. That makes it a ton easier for us to prosecute them. If you're that uncomfortable with it, take the script. My other suggestion is if you do get a fake script, and for some reason, again, I gave you that tip line. I can't be everywhere. Depending on what jurisdiction you're in. They're not going to be able to get there by the time the person comes back. It could be due to call volume or whatever. Definitely don't give them the script back. That's my other opinion. I wouldn't give them the script back.
Yeah, well,
If you know
I guess,
it's
like, they can't do anything unless they pick it up, though. Do you see what I mean?
because they're in possession of it then.
Right, so I guess to try and prevent you from putting yourself in a potentially bad situation, just might be something to think about.
I agree with you, but again, if you're uncomfortable with that, if you called me and I asked you the particulars, hey, this is a subject, I know that this is a fake script, I spoke with the doctor, I would probably tell you to do the same thing.
Well, then I guess people were concerned with too is that you're knowingly dispensing a fraudulent prescription. So it's kind of a gray area with as far as the pharmacist.
But you're also doing it under the government's direction, so to speak.
But
That would be the same as if I'm using an informant, because I work narcotics. If I use an informant to go buy pills off you, if you were a pharmacist that was selling pills, well, technically it's illegal for that informant to possess those pills that I'm buying off you, but she's acting on behalf of the government.
Well, I guess that's what people were concerned of. It's not really necessarily written anywhere that the pharmacist is protected. It's kind of a gray area. Well, you're knowingly dispensing something, but you're doing it but there's nowhere to protect you in any legal documentation. You know, if someone, not that anyone would come after you necessarily, but I mean, it's just a gray area.
I would advise you to do it. If I called, that's what I would ask you to do. But again, if it's something you're uncomfortable with, those are choices that you have to make. And again, I don't have all the answers. I don't. I wish I did. I wish we could snap our fingers and the opiate addictions could go away and prescription abuse could go away. The fact is, it's growing more and more. I don't have all the answers. I wish I did. But the best thing is, common sense is your best friend when it comes to crime, and observing your surroundings. Anyone else? Nobody yelling at me yet? All right, hey, thank you very much for your time. I do have to go too. Thank you. God bless you guys. I appreciate what you do.
Section, thank you very much. Just momentarily before we get to Joe's CE presentation here, like I was talking with Antonio on here on one issue there, and this is something that we may be able to assist in the process. Do you want to make a quick mention about that pending legislation?
Very relevant to what he was just talking about. There's two bills right now, one in the House, one in the Senate, that deals with ID checks. There's a few states that are already mandated, but there's what these bills would do is mandate that every pharmacist check the photo identification and track that identification for anybody picking up a prescription for any controlled substance. So there's some obvious problems that that we see with that. But there's good news, bad news. The good news is that they are finding that ID checks are really helping them bring down some of these operations. The bad news is this is a logistical nightmare. We're working with the bill sponsors to whittle this thing down to make it practical. So right now, is every controlled substance being diverted right now? No. So we want the Board of Pharmacy to have the authority to pick which drugs are being diverted, which ones they want to track. Also, if you have patients that longtime patients, you should not have to check their ID for every control that they're picking up. We also want exemptions in there for religious reasons, obviously the Amish community, things like that. We're also putting in language in there that would ensure that mail order has to abide by the same rules as retail. And we also want to make sure that you don't have to check ID on refills and things like that. So we're working to make it more manageable. Hopefully it doesn't pass and becomes something so arduous and so ridiculous that it really inhibits your ability to service patients properly. We're making the case that this might be a little too much. They're saying, hey, do you not care about prescription drug abuse? So they're painting us as the villains on this, when really we're trying to make this as best as possible so it doesn't become ridiculous. Any questions on it? Thank you.
I Now, Joe, you come forward and we'll start our CE program.
Thank you, Paul. I'm really happy to be invited here. I've been up this way for a long time. Telling Antonio on the way up, the Sabino family has roots up here. Many, many years ago, damn near 100, the Sabinos followed a steel mill to Girard. And as we were coming up State Street, where the Santese's Market is, building they knocked down used to house a place called Sabino Brothers, which was a Italian butcher shop and market that my grandfather and his brother ran back there. And down, I think, around State Street and Main was Dar's Drugstore, which became Meetings, which I don't know what it is there now, but that's where my dad started as an apprentice pharmacist. So I haven't been up here. Last member of our family passed away in 1995. I don't think I've been back since, but really quite happy to be here. I'm going to talk about ores and some of the issues that were involved in its inception and kind of where it stands today. What I want to talk to you about, talk some about the drug abuse problem that in Ohio that led to the mandating of ores, and other steps have been taken to reduce the availability of prescription drugs for abuse. Talk a little bit about how the system was implemented, what's required of it. Talk about some of the standards that the Pharmacy and Medical Board have put up for the mandatory use of it. Talk a little bit about the morphine equivalency, dosing that appears on the ORS report now, and look at some of the things that are going down the line in the future. But since we're talking about the law, you always have to talk about disclaimers. And so I have to read the four. Get this thing to work. There we go. Okay. First disclaimer is, unfortunately, I have no financial relationships to divulge. Kind of the way that works. Okay. We're going to talk about, look at state and federal laws and regulations and how they apply to practice. Now, I'm not here to give legal advice. If you're really worried about something that you're doing, you better call Saul. That's Walter White's attorney. A little unorthodox, but I hear he's quite effective. Number 3. All opinions expressed in this presentation are well-reasoned and insightful, and therefore do not represent those of any of the state, federal, licensing, or regulatory boards. And number 4, feel free to ask questions at any time. Remember, there's no such thing as a stupid question. Stupid answers, however, are in the eye of the beholder. Also, black box warning. Law can be a little bit boring. And I'll try to stay awake during this if you do. If I do see anybody falling asleep, Larry left me his taser for about an hour, and I have it back here on charge. If any of you ever have trouble sleeping, by the way, you might keep a copy of the Ohio Revised Code beside your bed. I guarantee that'll have you out in about 10 minutes. At the very latest. It should be at least Schedule 4. But if you do, please read responsibly. The problem that all of this is brought about by substance abuse. And substance abuse is something that's about as old as mankind. Probably first caveman that went and scraped the scum off of some fruit that was rotting in his cave and wondered, would that be good to drink? Was where it began. About 6,000 BC, when man started farming, developing grains, they started to make wines, wheat beers, and this sort of thing. But it wasn't until man learned the art of distillation that more potent forms of alcoholic beverages came around and abuse became more problematic. Many societies use mind-altering substances in religious rites or ceremonies to relax, to gain insight, to experience visions, very common around the Native Americans. It was not until the mid-19th or 20th century when substance abuse became to be viewed as a problem, a serious problem, and that was mostly with alcohol. Although people were becoming addicted and using things like opium and cocaine back then, and early pioneers in psychiatric treatment began to treat people for the symptoms and signs of drug abuse. Arrest for drunkenness and some of the disorderly conduct sequelae from that was about the biggest problem law enforcement had, until the advent of the automobile, when it became a real serious problem. 1932, the American Psychiatric Association put forth its first definition of drug abuse, substance abuse, and said that it was a term that applied to the illegal, non-medical use of a limited number of substances, most of them which have properties altering mental states in ways that are considered by social norms and defined by statute to be inappropriate, undesirable, harmful, threatening, or at a minimum, culture alien. That was the first real definition. Quite a few people in history have issues with substance abuse. Sigmund Freud himself used cocaine. Robert Louis Stevenson, the author of Treasure Island, wrote his famous novel, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, on a 6-day cocaine binge. Isn't that a surprise? Adolf Hitler, Judy Garland, and Sir Anthony Eden all used amphetamine. Aldous Huxley, the author of Brave New World, experimented with LSD, as well as Ken Kesey. Anybody know who he was? He wrote One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Very appropriate. And prescription drugs. I think the most famous person involved with that was Elvis Presley. But the effect on the individual drug abuser are pretty serious. Loss of employment, disease, homelessness. They estimate that somewhere between 60 and 70% of our homeless population has either a substance abuse or mental health issue, probably about evenly divided. Disease, AIDS, Hep C from needles, come from that. Families are broken up. People commit crimes, as we've talked about this evening, to obtain drugs, sell drugs. Drug trafficking, for some reason, just seems to bring out the worst in some people. But it's there, and ultimately, if it's left unchecked, it will lead to death. Collateral damage, not just to the user, but to the people around them. In the economic situation, example, illicit drug users are more likely to miss work, to change jobs, to have problems related to their impairment, and that's a great cost to our economy. 50 to 80% of all child abuse and neglect cases that have been substantiated by children's services, protective services, involve some sort of substance abuse by the parent. That's frightening. Drug users drug of choice will vary, and tastes change from time to time. But if you ever talk to an addict, and I spent 8 years on the Board of Pharmacy, and we dealt a lot with substance abuse among pharmacists, an addict will tell you that the first time I had, and you fill in the drug that they like, whether it's alcohol, benzodiazepine, opiate, I was made whole. It was me. And that is a very, very personal thing with these, but it's something that really gets a hold of them and seems to get a hold of them very fast. Prescription drugs have always been a popular source for drug abusers. They're readily available. They produce the desired effect. They're easily identified. I remember back in the day when I was behind the counter that certain people didn't want generic acetaminophen and codeine. They wanted the T3s, street cred. They could take those out and show somebody exactly what they were. 514s, the markings for OxyContin are extremely noticeable, and these people know what they're after and they know what they're getting. They're considered safe. Well, my grandmother takes this stuff, the doctors give it out, you know, it's safe. Prescription drug abuse represents about 30% of the overall drug problem in the U.S. today, according to the DEA, like Mark Rubio. Ohio had the distinction, I guess, of being number 2. We usually like to be number 1, but we're number 2 behind Florida as far as the prescription drug abuse capital of the U.S. for the last years of the 90s and the first 10 years or so of this century. Florida came in first. Of course, they're the source of everything evil, I think, that's going on as far as fraud, abuse, medical problems. They were quite a bit ahead of us. But in the state of Ohio, and the years that these statistics are from are old, and they're old for a reason. From 1999 up to about 2007, there was a 141% increase in the number of admissions for substance abuse for prescription drugs in Ohio. Accidental poisonings in 2007 became the leading cause of death by injury, more than automobile accidents and suicides. Prescription drug overdoses. And the death rate for these unintentional poisonings increased more than 300% in that period of time. Opioids were the primary problem, with the dusting of benzodiazepine. The poster child for the problem in Ohio was Scioto County. This was a particularly hard hit. And they had, within this small county of Ohio, it's down on the Ohio River, maybe a city with a population of about 30,000, but they had 8 of these pill mill clinics, these rogue clinics in town, one of them located less than a block from the sheriff's office. And they were turning out scripts. Why Scioto County? Scioto County's Appalachia. Employers were moving out, unemployment was up, people were economically strapped, and this was a quote from one of the nurses there that described what happened down there as a pharmaceutical atomic bomb went off. 90% of the crime in Scioto County during those years was drug related, and probably still close to that today. 10% of the babies born in Scioto County in those years tested positive for drugs. Frightening. Rehab admissions for painkiller addiction, 5 times the national average in one little county in Ohio. 90% of all drug deaths from overdose, for prescription painkillers, opiates. The kinds of things you expect to see in big cities. Per capita rates of murder, fatal overdoses, Hep C, infections, things that point to a very high crime rate due to drugs. Scioto County had higher incidence of these things than the major metropolitan areas in Ohio. Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati. And there were 117 fatal overdoses in that county. When you get this on a personal basis, it's very frightening. There was one young woman down there, 34 years old, that went to a pill mill in Portsmouth, paid $250 for a prescription for oxycodone. She had to take it to Columbus to get it filled because the pharmacies down there wouldn't fill prescriptions from this clinic because they knew what was going on. Next morning, she's dead from an overdose. Pharmacist who filled it was indicted for trafficking, money laundering, and falsifying his tax records, by the way. Not all the people going to these pain clinics were using the product themselves. One woman who lived in a rural area down a little country road in Scioto County said that when before the oxycodone problem hit, 10 years prior to when she was talking to the reporter, she had 2 children who were in high school. Within 5 years of the OxyContin advent in that town, both of her children were addicted. 11 houses on this country road were selling prescription drug medication. And one of them was a 74-year-old man who was selling it to supplement his Social Security check each month. Her son in prison for robbery and sober. Her daughter moved in with a man who was known in the county to have access to prescription drugs. Somebody broke into their house, shot her, shot him in front of her 8-year-old daughter. She was 29. So substance abuse is a terrible thing, and both economically, socially, and on a personal basis. It hits pretty hard. So what constitutes a legal prescription in the state of Ohio? If you look at section 4729-5-30 of the Ohio Administrative Code, which is part of the Board of Pharmacy rules, it says that a prescription to be valid must be issued for a legitimate medical purpose by an individual prescriber acting in the usual course of his or her professional practice. The responsibility for proper prescribing is upon the prescriber, but a corresponding responsibility rests with the pharmacist who dispenses the medication. Any order that is not issued for a legitimate medical purpose is not a prescription, and anybody who knowingly dispenses it or issues it shall be subject to the penalty of the law. You know what the term for issuing a prescription for providing controlled substances to somebody without a license is, or without a prescription? You know the name of it? Name for it? Trafficking. As this poor clown is going to find out here pretty quick.